Hello! This episode of Bonfireside Chat is brought to you by a couple things. One, as always, our Patreon backers. Go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. Two, action item. You have just a couple days to go to storybundle.com/games and pick up the Pico game bundle. This is a awesome book bundle, ebook bundle that I am part of. You get a bunch of cool stuff. Dungeons and Dreamers, which looks awesome. Complete Kobold Guide to Game Design. Boss Fights Books is part of this. Hardcore Gaming 101 has their 200 best video games of all time. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on shows, but boy, do I love Hardcore Gaming 101. I am such a fan of those guys. Anything but sports, the making of FTL, which is very cool. And then the reason why I'm telling you this is because you can get Souls of Darkness, my Dark Souls inspired book, as well as the audiobook for this if you get the full Pico set. So a significant portion of the proceeds of this are going to an organization called Pixels, which is a nonprofit that supports women in gaming, a cause that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm giving 10% of my personal proceeds to the ACLU. So this is a good cause. I am going to make money off of it, but no shame, I have to pay rent. But I'm also going to give back because, it's important to do what you can. So again, you can go to storybundle.com/games. Thank you.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
Welcome to the painted world of Ariandel. I am Frida. I have long stood beside our Blessed Father and the rest of the forlorn. But forlorn thou seemeth not. Ashen One, I know not the missteps which led thee to this painted world. But thy duty is all, and thy duty lieth elsewhere. Return from whence thou camest.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And I'm Dave Riley.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat, and it is a rotten favorite.
And this week we are talking about the Ashes of Ariandel DLC for Dark Souls 3, speaking specifically about the entirety of the painted world of Ariandel, which is the entirety of the DLC. And as you heard, we're joined by Dave. Dave, welcome.
Thank you. I'm ecstatic to be here.
Yeah.
Yay.
So tell people where they might know you from.
So for the past 11 or so years, I've done the podcast Fast Karate for the Gentleman, which is a sort of goofy anime and video games podcast. That's mostly just about cracking jokes with this old friend of mine. Mm-hmm. But I do a lot of video game streaming, me and my wife, which you can find at bossdoors.tv, which is just a redirected twitch.tv/Fast Karate. I mean, that's the most of it. Yeah. I'm just sort of an internet dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're a citizen of the internet.
Yeah, and, I mean, you guys found me, or rather, I guess listeners directed you guys to my Ashes of Ariandel review on the Anime News Network, mm-hmm. Which is, I guess, I could say I'm technically a game reviewer, but I don't dip my toes in that field too much lately. Just haven't really had the time for it, so. Ashes of Ariandel was like a sort of a one-off. I mean, I think I've written maybe 2 professional reviews this year or something.
Yeah, it was. So part of it was wanting to. So the review was linked to me, and as people who listen to the network know, like I'm not a big anime guy, but I read it regardless because I was like, oh, this is not directly anime related. And I like the review a lot. Like it resonated with my thoughts on the DLC quite a bit. And then I posted about it in our Slack, and the person who actually directed the review to me said, like, yeah, that's Dave. He does this podcast. He's really great. It's how I got my username, etc. And then I kind of looked into it. I do kind of like just to make sure we don't get anybody who's, secretly going to be a jerk. You know, if it's somebody who I'm not familiar with, I do some kind of cursory research just to make sure that, like, you know, nobody's going to come on here and just start throwing around slurs, you know, or anything like that.
No, I get the instinct, definitely.
There's a little bit of a screening process if it's somebody I'm not familiar with, and looked it up, and I was like, oh, like, this dude's, you know, legit. And it's nice having podcasters on. Because, you know, it's nice, you know, non-podcasters are great as well. It's not, you know, either or, but it's good to have somebody who knows their way around a microphone.
Yes.
You could say that. I mean, you could say that's something I do. As I like, the most recent podcast I recorded on my phone.
Oh yeah.
And
get
the
out.
microphone on my computer, and I'm glad I had the phone back up because I tabbed to Wikipedia on my computer and pushed stop and audition. So yes, I am a podcaster in so much as, like, I don't know.
So some of your voice has made it to the internet.
Yeah, you know. Some of it hasn't, you know, through various technical glitches. But yeah, I was super enthused to sort of hear that my name was being spread around this way, because I just assume it is not. We have a really small community, but as you might gather, very passionate, or rather very, I don't know, interconnected. There's, like, you know, a few dozen people who sort of inhabit this circle. So it's really satisfying to know that somebody was sort of responded to my review well enough to be like, hey, let's tell these other guys who are super into Dark Souls stuff and do this Dark Souls thing. I found it really flattering.
It's a good example of that quality in action, which is one of the, you know, there are a lot of dark sides of the internet. A positive side of the internet is that, like, if you like something, and, you know, there maybe, you know, there don't have to be, like, you should let people know about it. You know, this is a really direct way to support something you like, is to be like, hey, I thought this was really great. Maybe you'd like it.
Yeah.
That is, like, a great thing to do for creators that you love. You know, and this was a thing that was like, oh, like, you know, our community member who is a big fan of yours, like, made the change you wanted to see in the world. He painted over my world that did not know about your podcast and your review, and painted it with a new fresh coat.
Yeah. Thank you, Lion Yeti.
Yeah,
exactly. How did you get into Souls? Have you always been a fan of the series? Is it new to you with the third one? What's your history with it?
Yeah, when Demon Souls came out, and there was that sort of very latent scuttlebutt about the Japanese version, I imported the Hong Kong or the Asian version that had English subtitles, and, like, really beat my head against it. And was like, kind of like, well, I like this. I feel like it might be way too hard. And that sort of continued into, like, even going through Demon Souls, and then a few years later, Dark Souls 1. It was like a good part of the way through Dark Souls 1 that I was like, oh, I think this is maybe my favorite game that's ever been made. Like, because and this seems so foolish now, but this is sort of my pattern with things. Like, I'll get into this and I'll be like, this is the hardest thing anybody has ever made. Like, this is so unfair. Like, I'm talking here about the Taurus Demon. Like, I maybe died 5 or 6 times on the Taurus Demon. I was like, this game's total BS. I hate it. And then, you know, now looking back on that, I'm like, oh, you can kill him with 2 hits. Like, so it was like maybe a third of the way through there when you start getting into stuff like the Depths and the Darkroot Basin, where I was sort of like, oh, I really like this game.
Yeah.
And they have become, like I said, it's pretty much my favorite series of all times, a sort of holistic Souls world. And it's a game that is especially important to me because I play, like, the majority of my games co-op with my wife. So for a really long time, I was like, we really have to, like, get another copy of Dark Souls and find a way to play this together. And she was like, you know, I played like some of Demon Souls. I didn't like it very much. And I was like, I think you should push through it. And, you know, eventually we got to this point, and Dark Souls co-op was so arcane, which is kind of one of my favorite things about video games, even as they're frustrating, is this, like, inherent source of mysticism that modern games have sort of really lost. And so like the sort of the ritual quality of just like Googling things, like reading stuff on GameFAQs, being like, all right, if you want to play with another person, here's what you have to do. Like you put down your summoning sign, then in their world, they put down their summoning sign, but immediately remove it. And like sort of stuff like that, because there were no passwords. And the problem with Dark Souls, I think, is that it was all peer to peer, because this is not an issue in Demon Souls. So like sort of going through that ritual, which could take like 45 minutes to like eventually link up with the person you were actually trying to co-op with. But the returns on that were so large. And as such, like I think me and my wife have probably played like, between the fact that every co-op Dark Souls playthrough is 2 playthroughs, like we've probably played Dark Souls 8 or 10 times, like Demon Souls 4 times. Like we've played, these are, I think I can speak for her and say that there are some of her favorite games too. And it's, I just don't feel like there are barely any experiences like a Souls game, which would easily lead into my review, where I feel like for the past couple years I've sort of been returning to this point of like, even a not very good Souls game is going to be like one of the best games that came out this year, at least at the pattern they're running now.
Yeah, it's kind of been like a running theme for the season too, where it's like it's been hard for me personally to express the balancing act of being like, this is very good, but I also hold the series to exceedingly high standards.
Yeah, there's a very obvious and oftentimes not stated double standard that we're kind of working with here.
It goes really double for the DLC too, which like, you know, I've talked about it on Twitter and on our Slack and stuff and on our Facebook page about this specific DLC we're going to talk about today, is that like I don't like it that much, and it doesn't mean that it's like a slog to play. Like it's not like a bad game. It's just like prior to this, I felt like From Software had like hands down made the best DLC in games. Like
I absolutely agree.
Like there are lots of DLCs I like. Like I'm a DLC guy. I don't resent them. I think more of the thing I like is usually good. But every one of them was a far and above. Like the Old Hunters was like so like they would make the original experience better, in a way that like I hadn't really seen before. And then for this one, just to not do that for me was just like so disappointing. So there's an element of that involved in my reaction to this. And
I would say that I am not a DLC guy. And I also think that the Souls games have among the best DLC ever. I feel like DLC, I just feel like you can always see the edges. There's just so many seams of like, oh, this is the thing you couldn't finish, but now we live in this connected world where you can, and you can slap a $10 price tag on it, and it's like not even that good. And that's how I felt even about like a lot of the Mass Effect 2 DLC, which everybody loves. Like, and I liked some of them, but others I was like, this feels a little feature light. So I feel like there are probably less than 10 DLCs in the world that I would say are absolutely essential. And like aside from Souls, I don't like the Dishonored DLC. I thought was like amazing.
Yeah, that's very good.
It's tough for me to think of things where I was like, oh, this was worth sort of suffering the 3 to 6 month rift of like completely removing this game from my mind and like coming back to it and rehabituating to its systems and stuff.
Yeah. It's regardless of whether. I mean, I play games in a weird way where I have infinite games to play and not enough time. So a weight like that usually benefits me. Like I get that kind of perspective. The thing with the way it worked with previous Souls games for me, like I never, Artorias of the Abyss came with Dark Souls for me because I bought that edition. But the way it worked with Dark Souls 2 and the Old Hunters was once I came to kind of expect it of like adding this context because of the way the stories in these games work. That is what like elevated it to me. So even as somebody who does like DLCs, these were on a different level. I'm with you in that. Like it was just like, oh, this is the best of the best. Like this is the best that the form of DLC, like that medium can do. From Software are doing it at its absolute peak. And then Ashes of Ariandel comes out, which is not that. And I think it's very hard for anyone, even people who like this a lot more than I did. It's hard I haven't seen a compelling argument that this does the same thing, the same work that the previous ones did. in kind of recontextualizing the base game and in just kind of setting a benchmark for quality.
Yeah. It's hard to gauge the intention of what they were trying to do here. And I think that's incredibly important when we start looking at these things. Like, I kind of want to know what they were aiming for, because even though that shouldn't completely inform how we come away from it, I at least want to know what terms I should be judging success or failure on,
Yeah.
With this, I don't know where it was supposed to fit. If it was something that was an initial, something that was part of the initial game or product or whatever. And so it is just kind of like this ultimate digression that, again, like Gary said, like you guys have said, doesn't do the heavy lifting. It doesn't have the strength to actually feel like it is additive. Yeah. Beyond just like time and assets.
Yeah. Like it is another area to explore. Like I got to see some title screens pop up, and that feels good. But other than that, like it wasn't, and we'll get into it. So for people who, who know this and want to know where we landed on this, the consensus on this is pretty negative, but I've also read some really kind of fervent defenders too. So this is going to be like a polarizing episode possibly, but that's got to be okay, because we do. What did we do previously, Cole?
Yeah, it's not really related. Like, there's not a through line.
Doesn't matter.
It does. Yep.
Well, the stuff that matters in the main game is that we know about the Sable Church. Mm-hmm. We know there are 3 sisters. We know that Pontiff Sullivan had to be born somewhere. Yeah. He's presumably was not created from the ether.
He didn't just come with the house. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like a phone book or a tide sample or something.
Yeah.
But what we did last time is unrelated to this entirely.
Right. We covered our Dragon Peak, but just look in your RSS reader. The other detail, thank you for mentioning the Sable Church. Man, the lore is so disconnected that it's kind of, we just need to tell the story by talking about it. But what people need to know is that in Dark Souls 1, where there was this amazing level called Painted World of Ariamis, this kind of prison dimension. I love that idea so much. Where these inconvenient people, weapons, magic, and information were kind of trapped and exiled, right? It was this gentle world, ostensibly, that you kind of accidentally fell into. And in the intervening years, these paintings haven't really gone away, or that art hasn't gone away. Maybe that painting itself hasn't gone away. And we're about to, kind of like get reacquainted with that.
Yes, it's been painted over.
Yeah.
So we're going to see a painting that it's a thing, and kind of right off the bat, like as a thing that clings on me that I haven't seen elsewhere. That's kind of frustrating. So like, the Painted World of Ariamis is my favorite Dark Souls level of all time, like far and above. That's my favorite stage, and that Eldritch prison for things that should not be is a very different idea than what's presented here. And that discontinuity is not something that I've seen kind of like lore series, even like lore people who I respect a lot, recognizing, where there is a difference between a prison, because the original Painted World of Ariamis, like there were cages and stuff. There were signs of this being a place where things were put, is very different than this kind of Eldritch area that attracts things that are sad. And the Painted World of Ariandel, it attracts the forlorn. Like the idea of this as a magical place is that things that have experienced great loss are sucked into this. Yeah, that's out of nowhere. Like that is not, and when I am reading, when I've read lore things or watched lore things that tie this into the Painted World of Ariamis, they always say like, Painted World of Ariamis, a place for the forlorn. Like, no, that's explicitly not what it was. And one of those ideas is much cooler to me than like a place that kind of magically attracts things with, that's lost its purpose.
Yeah.
Because there's agency. Like imprisoning something tells a more complete story than a magical thing that just attracts unrelated sad things. Like there's motivations involved, and there's no motivation here. Like it is just a property of the place.
Yeah. This is just the island of misfit boys. Like all it does is like people who've lost their homeland, people who they just kind of magically end up here, just through whatever. And even the people, I don't know. We'll get to that when we talk about it, but it's which is not a bad concept. It could have just, again, like so many of the things, it could have just been something else.
Could have been its own thing.
Yeah.
Did you have anything about, or any thoughts about that, Dave? Like when you first kind of got to this or realized what the painting was in Dark Souls 3 versus,
Well,
what paintings are.
I mean, so I don't know. I never know how hard to go at this point because I have to work hard to resist the instinct of like, well, this is what it should have been. I sort of try to erase that from my brain, but it has frustrated me for like the past 10 years. Or I mean, I guess it's 6 years, whenever Dark Souls 1 came out, that the painted world is just some like snowy castle. Like, at the time, like I'd read the area name, so I maybe fell victim to my own hype, but I was sort of expecting something more than like, well, this Souls area, this could have existed anywhere. Like, and it is all, and I like the level. Like, I think it's one of the sort of best, most intricate levels that the original Souls has. And I like Priscilla. Like I like a lot of thematic things about it, but it's always kind of felt to me it was like almost like proto DLC. It's like and sort of so the story goes, I don't know how true this is, but that it was like kind of a prototype level or like a proof of concept that they made, and they were like, well, we did all this work on it, let's stick it in the game somehow, but we can't link it up to an area for XYZ reasons, so let's cordon it off in its own zone, and then we'll make up this painted lore or painted world mythos to go along with it, which I think is fine. Except that like you go in there and it's this castle with like zombies in it. And then you talk to Priscilla and she's like, this world is peaceful. It's inhabited, it's kind. It's like, oh yeah? Like all this super like pustule toxin zombies that were spitting flames at me and then they explode and then I die in 2 seconds because I've got toxic and poison on me at the same time. So I mean I found that frustrating, but it was always just something, you sort of bring up as a joke, but doesn't feel like a lasting impact. But to see that process repeated, I was like, come on, guys. Like,
the way you're describing that reminds me of like a thing that's always frustrated me about the Matrix sequels is that there's like a moment that I'll always remember in movies where like you're watching the second Matrix movie and you run to the Merovingian and he's like, that's right. And he's like,
nerd.
Okay, tell me more about the Dragon Ball characters you know about.
Yep. No, I'm just a different tat man.
It is nerdy, but he's saying like, all those things that you thought you believed in, vampires, werewolves, aliens, they were all glitches in the Matrix. And you're like, oh shit, this is the guy that understands this. I'm going to finally watch Neo fight something that's not a kung fu guy because this guy controls like vampires and shit. Like, whoa, this just got lit. And then instead though, he just summons a bunch of kung fu guys. And it's like, well, fuck, But
they're like albinos with white dreads, so they're ghosts, man.
That's not cool. There's no legend of that. That's not a glitch in the Matrix. That's a glitch at Hot Topic with like, a glitch in the tanning booth. Like that's not the, and so the idea that, I understand what you mean, where it's like, it's supposed to be this kind of world of imagination. But it did end up just being kind of an area. The way that it worked for me though, were those ties back to the main game, like it was kind of like the original world of Painted World of Ariamis was an optional area that actually did what an optional area should do, which is not be necessary to understanding the main plot, but enrich your understanding of the main plot. So like kind of filling in these holes with like, oh, now we know what Velka is. And like Velka is a big part of like my personal interpretation of the cosmology of Dark Souls 1, that's what makes the most sense for me as an instigating factor, like that got you out of this, the crow that takes you out of the asylum. Like, the gods were scared of Velka so they put her worshippers and kind of her iconography in this prison, but she's able to operate outside of that. Like it just kind of made like a sense, like it, some of it may have been headcanon, but it added to it, even though it wasn't necessary. Whereas everything here feels like a non sequitur. Like it's all new stuff that tells a complete and fine enough on its own story. That, however, how it reflects on the main game is not enriching at all. Like I don't need to know where Pontiff Sullivan was born. Like it doesn't help.
That's what I was going to say when you guys were talking about that. First off, I had forgotten that was in there because it's in like an item description. It may be in like a spell description.
Yeah, it's in 2 spells. All of
that's fine.
All the cryomancy you get relates to Sullivan.
But I immediately contrasted that with like, I about flipped my shit when like Chester in the Dark Souls DLC is like, these guys, this serpent came round, and I was like,
Yeah.
that's I mean, it might be Frampt, it might be Kath, it might be somebody else, but like that's something I know about, and you're telling me in this way where I know, and I know and you're being like a little coy, but you're not actually being coy at all, and that's very exciting to me. And there's nothing like that in Ashes of Ariandel for me. It
fills in fragments of Sullivan's story, like those spells that we see, and we should probably just state out right. This is where Sullivan was born. And we'll talk about the characters he may have been born to when we get to them, but this is where he was born. So it fills in that fragment of his story. The problem is, like, that is not a hole that was noticeable, apparent, or, glaring when we were actually playing the game. Sullivan had a pretty filled out story because the entire part of his life that kind of matters was on display. Right.
Yeah. And the part of it that could have been the prequel stuff to that would have been useful, which is like, so the question mark is how much, what is his connection to Lothric? Like what was he originally somebody who was part of that kingdom and stuff? And there's theories to that. It seems likely. We don't know. This could have answered that question, but it goes before that to give like where he was born, which is just not that useful to a biography, like where somebody is raised or what they came from is much more useful. So it feels like trivia, and like knowing about this third sister, again, like there's no spoilers. Everybody who's at this point has presumably played the DLC or doesn't care. We learn about this third sister of the Church of Londor. It doesn't reflect on the Church of Londor, though. That's still a player in the main game.
Right.
Like this, what we know about Elfride does not help us understand the Lord of Hollow's business from the main game.
No, she explicitly has cut all ties from it.
So it's trivia. Like we learn a lot of trivia about the world of Dark Souls 3, which is like not terrible, but I just expect more from this. Like every other DLC has done more than that. So it's just frustrating. And we're gonna actually go through it. This has been a long preamble for this, but it's a meaningful episode or a meaningful thing to look at because it's the first DLC of Dark Souls 3, and we spent all year being like, the DLC is going to wrap this up, and like to just have it not do any of that stuff is powerfully disappointing.
And it still could.
I feel like
it's not possible to criticize something if there's more of it on the way.
I have no faith. Like I have zero faith that they will fix it, because what this signaled to me is that, and this is something they've said too, and maybe I thought they were being coy or maybe I was being willfully ignorant, is that they think the story of Dark Souls 3 is complete as is. There are like interview lines to that effect. I'll see if I can try to find them for the show notes, but there's things to that effect. Like, no, Dark Souls 3 is done. And this signals like, no, they really think Dark Souls 3 is done. I really don't. And that dichotomy or that conflict is hurts my heart, so that's where a lot of the kind of bile from this is going to come from, and being super pissed at the bosses. So we'll get there as well.
I mean, you brought up headcanon, and just super briefly, I mean, this is the thing, is like, to me, this DLC feels kind of just like a microcosm of what felt kind of wrong about Dark Souls 3 to me in the first place. And it's this idea that like the game almost feels like fan fiction. And most of Dark Souls 3 feels kind of like this extrapolation or iteration on ideas to the point of error and way past it. And I don't mind the sort of creators giving themselves their bon mots or whatever. Like they deserve a pat on the back, and they deserve to pat themselves on the back. But going through this thing and just feeling like you're being winked at like every 2 seconds is so exhausting. And I like the shield reference in Bloodborne, for example. Like, I'm not immune to this stuff, but to feel like the entire game is comprised of it, and then to feel like the DLC for the game is this, like, in a lot of ways, like one-to-one transposition of what we sort of understood a painted world to be. It's like, oh, we're in the snow level again. And like, I love snow levels. Like, that's my favorite kind of level. But it was like, here's another wolf guarding a grave. Like, it just stuff like that. It's just like, guys, come on. Like, I know you have better ideas than this. Like, or rather, why are you so committed to being like, well, it almost feels like this thing where like the concept, it's acting like the concept is this sort of word of God or like, provided to you from on high thing that you can't moderate, or like there can be no interpretation outside of like, this is a game about cycles. So, here's the literal next cycle where everything is pretty much the same. And even some of the characters are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. That idea of like, that bereftness of new ideas is something that I feel throughout this whole DLC. That's something that I feel really acutely here. And that's going to play into, like I said, a little bit later with some boss stuff.
Yeah. So all of this is to say, like, we've made it very clear kind of like what our broad feeling of this is. If hearing people criticize Dark Souls 3 brings you any physical or psychological distress, or will make your day worse, understand what this is going to be. We're going to build the case, but like, I don't know. At this point, you should kind of know what you're in for.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. So you know what you're in for. This is us. We're not going to lie, but this is also, you have been warned. So, and it's not going to be like an AVGN style. Like, it's the bad boys of gamers
it's
ramping it up.
It's not a takedown, It's
I swear I have well-reasoned kind of reasons to have these opinions. It doesn't mean you have to agree though as well. So it's like when I say that the final boss of this is excessive, if you had a lot of fun with it, I can't take that away from you, and I wouldn't if I could. It's just, this is why I found it unfun, because of blank.
Right.
So, the way we get here, let's talk about how we get here. This is one of the more direct ways that we've gotten to a DLC in that a NPC, Slave Knight Gale, is found in the cleansing chapel of the Cathedral of the Deep. And he talks to us. He talks about how he's looking for a second ash to bring fire to Ariandel. And he holds out a scrap of paper.
Nice.
He's like, you would be the second ash to come here. My lady lives in a cold land of Ariandel. I need you to show her flame that will burn the rot away. And since you are ash, you seek fire. This is going to be your thing. Do you click A and get sucked into the painting?
Very violently sucked into the painting too. I don't remember it being that Ghostbusters-y in the first one.
Yeah, it's like how eating a chicken wing and like dragging the bones through your teeth.
Yeah.
Except for with a Dark Souls character.
But I love the idea that this might be all that's left of that painting, but that's still like, this scrap that's, handkerchief size in his pocket is already the portal, or is still the portal. No.
It's accompanied by his like Dark Souls laugh. So like, as the screen's fading, you get that like key.
Yeah.
And you're like, what was that guy about? He was a bad guy. Oh no, what have I gotten into? And it's like, no, it turns out you can just leave. Like the bonfire's right there. You just leave anytime.
It's literally no problem. It's so weird because the characters draw attention to that in this DLC in a way they haven't before. Like the fact that his motivations are possibly suspect in this are confusing, because this, similar to kind of the main game, there's going to be some cosmology stuff that we don't really get an answer for. The actual character that we are going to show flame to, there are guesses about her and her motivations. I have not read anything conclusive or even like intensely convincing, as to, so Gale's, purpose of doing this. We learn about these kind of two different schools of thought on what to do with the painted world. We don't get the context for which one of those is the correct one. And this laugh is a weird thing. The fact that he kind of gives this sinister laugh when everything, if I just played through the level, I would think that what I was doing is actually a morally correct action.
Right.
Here. So that kind of confuses things, and maybe there'll be more of that in DLC too.
Yep. And also his orgiastic groaning when when you accept, like, he loses himself, and he even like apologizes, like, oh, I'm sorry, but like he's full on like flooding the basement there. I think it's real. It's a little much, and you get the sense, okay, so he's a slave knight. We know the slave knights are these like cannon fodder that were sent out basically to fight wars forever because they could never die. And he is at the end of his rope, all of that. But yeah, it is definitely kind of this classic Dark Souls, I don't know where this guy stands right now. Kind of
get
deal.
tricked, into doing something that again, like feels like a good thing to do. So we wake up in a frozen field in a cave where there's this kind of beast character who is kind of has these bird-like qualities as well, who's on a bed of rotted fungus. And he says, "Hey, welcome to the peaceful world of Ariandel. Find yourself a pile of shit and go to sleep in it forever."
Yep. Be claimed by the blood moss.
Yep. That's a same. Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like,
but I drop into this into this cave and I think, oh, that's a Bloodborne texture, isn't it?
yeah.
there are large parts of this that look a lot like the flora and fauna around the Hunter's Nightmare, which isn't. I'm not accusing them of recycling assets or anything, but it's a very similar idea. This pervasive rot.
Yeah. And we are introduced to kind of the big meaty section of the first kind of part of gameplay here, which is hard to describe in sequence.
Right.
Because this is something that Dark Souls doesn't do a lot. The series doesn't do a lot. Is a big, huge open area, which is what we're going to deal with here for this first part. So there are individual encounters, there are enemies and everything, but the geography is a little bit tricky. There are a few like kind of switchbacks up mountains and a couple of landmarks, but a lot of it is just a big, endless field. How do you guys feel about that as kind of a level design thing? And what are some other kind of examples where we've seen something similar to this? Like I can only think of a couple. It's like a little bit like the Royal Woods, or the optional area, the shittiest optional area from the Dark Souls 2 DLCs.
Bread of Sacrifice is a little bit that final part, the Crucifixion Woods kind of area. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking about it. My comments were more sort of internal to it, that I mean, I like this. I like sort of roving, and I feel the problem is that it doesn't really cure what is like Dark Souls, where it has always been Dark Souls thing, is like just run by everything. Like you can either play the game the way it sort of wants you to play it, or like it looks like it wants you to play it, which you do the first couple times of like aggroing only a couple guys at a time and playing fairly cautiously. And then you start your boss runs and you realize like, oh, I can run by everything in this level and be fine. And like by the time I go to the boss door, they'll just be gone. So I feel like that's even more exacerbated in this like super wide open place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I was just going to say, it's something that I have kind of mixed feelings about. Like, there are individual encounters here I like a lot. As far as enemies go, I think this is the strongest that the DLC will get.
Yeah.
The actual mix-ups and things that you fight in these areas are the best of the kind of combat here.
It's lower percentage, like infinite stamina big guys. Like the followers can be pretty annoying. But they're, for the most part, pretty manageable, like hollow type enemies. I really like the wolves. The wolves can be super dumb. Like you can stand by a cliff and they will run off the cliff like lemmings, I guess. But as an enemy, it felt very unique in that, like, oh, this is like something I haven't really experienced. That like they'll kind of behave somewhat like real wolves do, or wolves do in movies and stuff. Anyway, they'll eye you warily from a distance, and if you get sort of in their grill, they'll howl, and then other wolves will come and they'll do this like circling around you, which like especially if you sort of trains yourself to use the lock on, like can make things pretty hectic. And then you're all of a sudden like you're just getting you're getting harassed by the ankles from behind, and like. And I thought the dryads were like another kind of good thing of like, oh, this is like sort of a neat enemy. It's super chip damagey. Like I found them kind of bothersome to fight because in a lot of areas there's like 6 or 7 of them close enough to like in aggroing one, you aggro another. And then if you get close enough to that one, you aggro someone else. And they're all shooting these like little tiny fireballs at you that don't really do much damage, but like in aggregate just kind of stun lock you to death. So like enemy wise, I think this is absolutely the strongest area and sort of has the most intrinsic relevance to its area, to it being like this snowy peak that these wolves hang out on. Is sort of it's evocative. I don't know. It's like a thematically cool, like look, I think wolves are cool. I maybe think wolves are cooler than the average person, and I usually don't want to kill those like cool, cute snow wolves. But like that big one shows up and you're like, oh, this is pretty scary all of a sudden. Like, and he does like a tornado, like a psycho crusher at you.
I've seen your shirts. I know you think wolves are cool. So
I think that the like this area, So of these big wide open areas, the accompanying enemies I feel are best designed to take advantage of that. And I like the comparison and contrasting between these followers of Farron, again, these wolf knights, right? Farron, they allied themselves. They followed in Artorias' footsteps, and they ended up here with the wolves. They kind of act similarly. Like they will both move to surround. They both kind of hunt in packs, and you very rarely, I can't remember if you actually fight them, if you fight mixed up groups of them. It's just kind of like the followers up here and the wolves down here. Good.
You can. So you can set up that set, and even within the followers there are mix-ups. So the followers have different kind of units things. I think the followers are actually one of the more successful enemies in Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
Because they are it's the exact opposite of what they have done with the Smashulons that come later, in that their difficulty is all tactics.
Right.
Like it's all like configurations. It's all because none of them they take a couple shots to kill. They're not beefy. They're smart. Like these guys are going to hold a shield to protect this guy who's throwing spears at you while this guy tries to get to your flank and breathe fire on you.
Yeah.
They're doing tactics, and the wolves do that too, and that's great. Like that's so good. That's what I'm missing from in the earlier games when they maybe didn't have the kind of AI capabilities to do that. They would accomplish similar things by arrangements. They'd be like little chess puzzles where like this guy is off to the side, he's going to see you and automatically aggro. Everyone's just going to kind of go for you, but they're arranged in a way to kind of create these tactically interesting situations. And this is an enemy that is like really well suited to that. Both of them are, the wolves as well, because the wolves, it becomes this kind of race against the clock to kill them before they summon more. Or like, hey, do I risk running here and having them at my back because they're not being aggressive right now? There's a lot of really tactically interesting things that happen with these two enemies, and I think they're really, really strong. Like, lest this entire episode be like a big pile of rot, like poison. Like this, these things are great.
Yeah. When I noticed how the wolves were behaving in this, we fought plenty of dog type enemies in these games. When I noticed what they were doing, that they were, kind of using the lack of visibility against me, that they were keeping a distance and circling to surround or flank, and that they were calling more of them. Like but my jaw dropped. Like that was a legit moment of, oh shit. Like, that is something brand new that the series has done. I loved it.
Yeah. And it also like sort of creates these great frantic moments of like trying to bust ass and just basically to get up in their grill, like of the medium-sized wolves, and just stun lock them before they can summon the other ones. Just being like, well, I this is my 10th time through this area. Like, I don't want to clear every wolf one by one. If I can just sort of skirt all the wolves except this last one at the area I'm trying to get to, I'll be fine. But I don't want to cause this chain reaction of like waking up every other wolf.
Yeah.
And I do really agree that like the followers were a good wake up for me not having played this game or probably much of any other Souls game in like the past 6 months, of just like, oh yeah, like I'm getting really irritated because I'm bouncing off their shield all the time. Oh, right. Remember in this game, you have to like two-hand your sword, so that doesn't happen. Sort of stuff like that, just like receiving this crash course and like, remember how you have to play a Souls game.
Yeah. Like you had to switch things up. You had to be smart, which like, that's what I want out of one of these games, is like demand something for my intelligence,
make me adapt,
Yep. So the wolves are great. The Farron Knights, as we mentioned, this is the rear guard of Farron's army, who got set here, and it makes sense. This place attracts people, who are sadsies, and it makes sense. They have been abandoned. Like their main keep, the watchdogs have fallen to the abyss. Several of their people are dead. There are all those gravestones outside of Farron's keep. Like these guys don't have a purpose,
right? And
that is what sent them here.
Yeah. So like they, were out there hunting these people who were abyss touched, these people who were affected by the pus of man. And boy, oh boy, give me a game set as that, like make me an abyss touch hunter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Yeah. Be a good D&D character class, like a prestige kit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they just kind of went hollow when they were on this. And again, because they had no place to settle when the world is upended, they ended up here.
Yeah. The wolves all belong to Balto's tribe.
Oh yeah.
And when Balto got killed at the end of Balto, they got super sad and got sucked into the painting.
Again, with the Don Bluth.
I don't know. I can't actually know what happens in Balto. There's the only wolf I could think of, and he might not be a wolf. He might be a husky.
I think he's a husky. I think he's a sled dog.
Well, shit.
Yeah.
There are enough famous wolves. I guess White Fang is the most famous of wolves. When it comes to, this is like a drill tweet. Like, I guess White Fang is the most famous of wolves.
Now we're gonna get the wolf fans on us.
But so the wolves, I'm not exactly sure what they were here, unless they were like Farron's literal dogs. Because the weird thing is, so we go through. There is a little trap where you fall through an ice shelf. Thing, which is like the thing I'm most scared of that could actually happen.
Like that in sinkholes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh man, this might happen. And then we can see from this point, I think you can go and look at the ledge and see the giant wolf. There's still the tree people. There's the huge forest of the tree people, but that giant wolf, we should talk about him because him or her, because you can trigger that giant wolf. Not right when you fall down, but not too far after it. Because I definitely fought the giant wolf down at the end of that kind of run. If you hug the cliff wall, there.
I think if the giant wolf came into play, I was already out of the scene.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that relates because I was sort of like in the very early stages of the DLC when I fought that thing. I mean, it's the same wolf, right? But it's a lot smaller. So is it?
It's I don't know. When you say the same wolf, do you mean the same wolf as the boss wolf or the same wolf as the regular wolves? Yeah, I think it is. It's got a very similar moveset.
It's bigger and it's brown, and it kind of does the same things, but it's not as big as that boss is. So, but it just seems to stop showing up. And like, I kind of did the usual Souls thing of like, oh, I got killed going this direction a couple times. I'm going to go this direction. So by the time I got back there, like I had already killed the boss and then there was no more wolf anymore. And I feel like I fought it once. I remember like you panic a lot because it's a pretty scary, like kind of mid-boss enemy when you've just been dealing with these wolves that are like fun to fight, but more or less trash. Like they die in 1 or 2 hits. So like, and it is very fast and aggressive and has a lot of health. So it is scary and you're flailing around for a while, but you get it down to like a quarter of a third of its health and it just pieces out.
It teleports away and gives you 3 large shards. Which made me think, like, what level am I supposed to be at this?
Yeah, this
to be going
DLC
here
is so cheap. It's so stingy.
Well, you get a bunch of slabs. You get like no chunks. It's so weird.
That's like I played it because I have like my co-op save with my wife and then like my sort of post-game save, and that's all the times I played the game. So I played it on my co-op save because that felt like it would probably be more level appropriate, and I found it like pretty hard. Both in co-op and solo, I was like, I do not feel like I'm killing these guys too quickly. And then to have like almost every enemy in the expansion drop Titanite shards, like not even large ones, I was just like, what are you doing to me? And I had like 2 chunks from the main game because that's where I was. So I was very frustrated by that. But I feel like that isn't that the case? I guess Bloodborne was really good with the chunks in the DLC, but I feel like the upgrade economy in the DLC isn't always the greatest.
Yeah, it's hard for me to recall. I know that the DS2 ones tended to give you a lot of the rewards were kind of jump starts on weapons. So it'd be like, hey, if you hadn't had a longbow up until this point, here's a +8 longbow. Like here's a weapon that's far along the path already in case you want to switch builds. But in this one, the fact that you can fight the boss of the area early and get three large shards is just like, do you know what's at the end of this DLC? Like, I'm not gonna fight this thing with like a +5 weapon. This is it's like the hardest like thing you've done. Like this is so difficult. It's just very weird. And then the fact that this is the largest concentration of slabs. Like you can get 3 Titanite slabs here.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I think we talked about it before, but like the idea, and all Souls games do this. This is not me picking on Dark Souls 3, but that they're so stingy with upgrade material, that 3rd level upgrade material, that they tend to be in optional areas near the end.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily optional, but kind of like side areas near the end, is a little bit troublesome for like, it's like it's based on New Game Plus, right? Like it's based on the idea that you'll get your final strong weapon at the end of the game, so you can go through. You can never get kind of settled and get your main weapon maxed out with enough game left to make it meaningful, really.
Yeah, I mean
know?
it's also a complaint that I've always had with Souls game, and it's to the point in some of the games where it's like, well, I hope you're psychic, like, because you
Yeah.
better really figure out what you want to play with. And like I talk about that, like I upgraded, like I used whatever Titanite shards and souls I had on this character to upgrade like 2 or 3 weapons into the +6 range during this DLC, and both times I came away just like, nah. Like to a couple of the new weapons, I was like, not really feeling these. That was kind of a waste of resources, but like whatever, use them or lose them. But comparing that, I mean, Souls games just make it too hard to be like, well, I want to switch midstream. Like, especially for DLC, like you feel like it should almost just be given to you because like otherwise, like, don't they want you to use this stuff? They made it.
Yeah.
And I feel like the only game that's done that really well for me is Bloodborne. Like, Bloodborne, every time I got one of those weapons, I was like, this is my new favorite weapon, or at least like I really want to play the game with this weapon.
Yeah.
And then this, it was more sort of like a cursory, like you find that javelin in this area that you can throw as a weapon art. And I was like, that is awesome. Like, I love the thing I like is when weapons have like weird things like that. And so I was really excited to use it. And I used it. I was like, this is kind of fun, but like kind of as expected. It's not a bow. And it's not melee. So like anything between those 2 points is just going to be this jack of all trades thing that isn't actually very good. So I just find it really disappointing. It's like, why are you putting this kind of arbitrary barrier in my way? Like, oh, here's all these fun new weapons to use. Like, I hope you want to go grind Dragon Peak, Mount Dragon Peak area, like go get some chunks if you want to actually use them. Nerd.
I like Mount Dragon Peak Airy. That's for the next game. They just smash everything. Yeah, it's even in Bloodborne that became a thing for me where like, I wanted some of those later weapons because you just get used to something.
Yeah.
And it's you're invested in materials and then also in time. So like and Bloodborne was better about it, I think, than the other ones. Like I would agree there, where like, I got the whirly gig and I'm like, I'm going to use this thing. Yeah, I'm going to make this work because this is badass. But there is like an element of like, I feel like Bloodborne specifically, I think I've floated this idea before on the podcast, should have just had all the weapons available from the start and the little demo area where you could try them. Like rather than that game had a problem with finding rewards anyway, but since you're supposed to be gaining like a relationship with your weapon and like knowing it 100%, it would have been very useful to have some of the, like, I want to be able to play through the whole game with the bow.
Considering you are in a hunter's workshop where things ostensibly would be made and prepared. Yeah.
I mean, I like I feel like there's some part of me likes it because I am like, this is something video games do not have nowadays, by and large, especially games on sort of this monetary level. Games with this sort of budget do not have things where it's like, you know what? Not everything in the world is going to be super convenient to you. And what that sort of breeds is like when we made new characters to play through the Bloodborne DLC, like me and my wife figured out a way to kill that the dude who has the bow like at super low level, and that can be really satisfying in itself, but that's sort of like it's this push and pull between like this sort of extended like replay value thing of like, oh, how can I kind of speed run this or like find new ways to give myself submissions to make the game fun again, versus like, you put this bow in my face, man, and I want to use it, but like I'm here to play the DLC, not to like spend 45 minutes or 2 hours like grinding chunks.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt about almost every weapon in this thing. Like, and I went out of my way to use them because I was reviewing the game and I was like, well, I should at least kind of try. And I'm a Dex build anyway. And so most of these things seem like they're kind of catered to Dex. And I was just like, I came away being like, that was a waste of time. Like getting this up to +6, I'm just going back to my bastard sword and I'm going to keep using that. And like, that is, it's been something that disappoints me souls wide. It's like, you pick up something that just looks amazing and you're like, well, but I still have this +7 longsword.
Yeah, it's hard to get out of the kind of habits. Like, I actually think that the new weapons in the DLC are one of the pluses, like big pluses for this. I think they're pretty neat. I just would rather have been able to play with them at a time I could go acquire them. Like the idea of taking a low level character in here and picking up like the quills sounds like a little bit more hassle than I really want to do.
Mhm.
I like that it's available though. Like this is, it's not quite Dark Souls 1 level of like non-linearity, but you could go and make a run for it.
Yeah.
It's probably easier to get to this place, like get to that cathedral, than it is to beat Amelia early on to go grab one of those weapons. So like this actually has a little bit of that non-linearity that I want. They're cool weapons. I just, at the time I got to them with my character that was ready for the end game, which felt appropriately leveled for the bosses and stuff. Like going here lower level would have been a challenge mode thing.
I think I was maybe in the 80s when I was here.
I was late 80s.
I find it very hard to gauge Souls games now because it feels like the I know there's like inflation.
Yeah, there's especially inflation in 2 and a little bit in Bloodborne, but I think
because I feel like you ended 2 at like 120.
Yeah,
or like somewhere in that above 100. I was like, whoa, I was like 60 at the end of Dark Souls 1. But it's just like a lot of those things. I was too deep in the game and too concerned with going forward to be like the quills are the ones where you throw the like little stilettos. Because I was like, this weapon is so cool. Like, this is the weapon I want to use. And then I like took it back and I upgraded it. And I think I made it sharp. I think it's one of those weapons. Like, I made it the best it could possibly be for my build. And then I go in and I'm like, all right, time to throw some quills. And I like throw it at one of the dudes. It's like 12 damage. And I was like,
those quills are so bad.
Back to the bastard sword. And you read the item description and it's like illusory, temporarily given substance. Like, so the quills are just make believe, man. I guess it's astonishing that they're doing 12 damage at all.
You hurt their feelings enough to do a little bit of damage, but that's it. I was super disappointed in the quills when I actually got them. Like these things wreck me. Like every time I get hit with these things, it sucks so bad, and I can't use them on anyone else to good effect. Tree. So the other big enemy we fight here. So the wolf boss. Like, did either of you guys fight it at this point?
Yes.
When it was here. Okay.
And it runs away, and I don't think I ever saw it again.
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, he shows up in the optional boss fight if he runs.
Right.
Even if you beat him here, which is that's a bummer. Like I would have liked to have like it been a thing where you could fight him here and it actually has an effect on a later thing. But it doesn't. It's just if you want those large shards.
It's killing me, Gary. Tell them large shards.
Large shards.
Yeah, large shards sent you. There we go. Yeah.
Large. I was setting you up. Yeah. But the wolf fight is nothing special. It's the same thing as every like big wolf fight we've had, more or less. Like he has a charge. He has like a angry growl at his side kind of thing. It's nothing special. He's not that interesting. The tree things which we run into, I think I'm with you, David, in that Dave, in that the density is kind of annoying. Like I love the way these things look. They're really creepy. And when I first saw them, I was trying to find ties like, oh, okay, I've seen people in similar poses to this in Lothric. They're turning into trees.
Kind of like the things that you
and so it's like, oh
pilgrims.
Man.
Again, it's another thing turning into a fucking tree.
Yeah, we literally do not need any other metaphors for fire burning out corruption, and we don't need any other things turning into trees or any other things turning into dragons. But like I was really expecting it. Like I was like, oh, is this going to actually answer that? Because like I didn't have a very good answer for those things. I think maybe they're the pilgrims, but I don't know for sure. But no, they are natives to this land, right? Is that's what it is, Cole? Like there's one item you can get there's a weird one. There's a weird crawly one you run into later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get that. I didn't see a description that had that when I was doing my research.
Doesn't that doesn't just drop a spell? I thought.
I think that drops you're right. That drops a spell that teaches us that it's where Pontiff Sullivan came from, which makes some people believe that it is Pontiff Sullivan's mother. So there's a lot of like people going out there being like Pontiff Sullivan was born from a tree. I don't really understand why. Yeah, sure. Okay, buddy.
Something I really like about these guys is they're very mournful. I like how sometimes you'll get those enemies in Souls who look like they're kind of just bumming out and like won't even try that hard to get you. And when they do their grab move on you, it's sort of like strangely compassionate. Yeah. And it's got this kind of like Virgin Mary, like La Pieta, like laying you down as like they don't just like grip you up and then start barfing the snow vomit in your face. Like they sort of embrace you and then hold you, and they're almost like cradling you as they're murdering you. And I really I mean, outside of like, I don't know, like Monster Hunter, like I think Souls is one of the only games that really does like substantial things with body language that aren't just like, I'm a Gears of War orc man and I'm like big and I'm gonna hit you with my chainsaw. Like, so like to see that stuff, like it's just like a sort of defiance of expectations, basically. I guess like, here's this big scary monster, but it's also like really sad and it feels for you, man.
Yeah, that dignity thing. We talk about that all the time. Like, that's a big thing. I think that they do that pretty well too. The kind of slow moving magic missile, like homing magic missile, I'm a little bit done with. And you get like multiple ones of those, like just filling the sky with them, because other than like they do magic damage, they do chip damage, so you can't really block them. The only way I know how to deal with them is kind of run away until I can find some kind of cover. Because there's too many to roll through. Like if you roll through the first wave, there's another wave right there, so you're just going to get hit. Like these things, I think they're kind of cool looking, and they're creative enemies, and they're kind of like mimics because you think they're just gonna be trees in the distance.
The first ones that you see are completely non-hostile. They just look like, that's a kind of human looking tree, isn't it?
That part is pretty rad. I think that they don't actually create interesting gameplay though. Like I don't think they're tactically that fascinating.
I think they do the thing that can make Souls games pretty aggressively unfun, which is like, well, the best way to mitigate this is to just completely get up in their face and like slam on them and hope that your stamina bar holds out longer than their life bar does, and then like dodge the next salvo of fire and go to the next one. And you've got this like trail of wolves nipping at your heels. And it's just like not that fun to be like, well, I'm just going to take advantage of the fact that like this game isn't quite prepared to meet you at a level beyond circle strafing every enemy.
Right.
So like I'm just gonna basically brute force it, but kind of the opposite of brute force in that you're like, I'm gonna take this path of least resistance. It's just very hectic.
Or just run past them. Like I feel like they also encourage you just kind of like to skip them, which I don't want to do. I never want to do that in my first run through of an area. Like I want to explore, which means killing everything. And that becomes mildly frustrating with these guys. Past these guys, so this is in kind of like a switchback. Again, it's kind of hard to explain the layout of this, but there's kind of a switchback that leads to this narrower pathway where we also start finding these kind of patches of this blood red moss and these fly creatures, which I think is the rot. This is the rot that's taking over the world. So there's evidence of that. The flies are not very interesting to fight, but they look creepy, and that's good enough for me. And they don't take 1,000 hits, so good on them.
Yeah, they're like almost like these counterparts to the centipede.
Yeah. So let's take so again, just even within this, there are like weird segments. Let's go take a side path to this entire other story that has nothing, like the Millwood Knights, right?
Like no, that's much later.
You got that later? Okay.
Yeah.
You can go to the Millwood Knights now.
Oh,
when I saw Tower, I thought that's what you meant.
No.
For me, it was after I finished the DLC. I had no idea that I beat the boss, and then I had no. I was like, well, I'm reviewing this. Maybe I'll just sort of poke around, make sure I didn't miss any items or whatever. There's lo and behold, there's a whole nother area.
Huh? Is this a? This is embarrassing. Is it on this side of the bridge?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go to where the wolf is up on the ridge. If you go past that, there is a archer's tower with Millwood and these ruins. There's kind of like a cover-based stealth section.
Oops.
Look,
okay.
I would not fault anybody for missing it because
oh man, people are gonna be fucking salty about that. Bonfireside chat, they don't like this thing. They didn't even play it all.
Yeah.
The layout of this is so impossible.
No worries. I can speak to it real quick while we're here. So it is you go past this wolf area and you start seeing ruins of like a township essentially. So like stone walls and these gigantic axulons, these Millwood Knights, these kind of big Viking looking knights. Their helmet looks like the same stag that is on what's his head? Not Pate, but Creighton's shirt, like that kind of, it's got that kind of thing. They're not connected though. And they are covered by this archer in a tower. And I feel like you're not supposed to fight them because it is so frustrating to fight them here while they are covered by an archer. It's like a great bow archer. It's not like a regular archer. And they take 1,000 hits, and I hate them as enemies.
Yeah, they're
they
a
have
total
unlimited
pain.
stamina. They're such a pain in the dick. They're not fun for me to fight. Like they just are Estus draining monstrosities, and I hate them. So
They're
what I did,
completely emblematic of like Dark Souls 3 monsters. It's
like
just
the worst of Dark Souls 3 monsters. Like
Yeah.
I can the Smashulons and like so the thing about the Smashulons we ran into before is they stop and do a thing. So they stop and like buff their mace and like, oh, I can attack now. These things never stop. They just continually run forward towards you with unlimited stamina forever. The combos are too long. I hate them. But
and it's like also a guessing game how long the combo is.
That's so frustrating. And that gets to
it's like, is it 2 hits or 3 hits?
There's an enemy later that has an 11-hit combo that is like peak terrible combo bloat.
It's too bad. Like I like these guys have that sort of like dust off move that I really like. And I don't know, I watch a lot of anime, read a lot of manga. Like they stick their axe into the ground and then they just like whack you with it. And so I sort of like them, and I like the Viking aesthetic, but like, yeah, I played this area by like very gingerly poking one of them with a bow and then kiting them all the way back to the beginning of the area. And I was like, this is the thing I hate about playing Souls games. Like I never want to play this way. Like I find it the least fun way to play. And like, especially now that I've played Bloodborne, you know, it's like 50-50 whether I'm going to use a shield at all.
Right.
And so like I found this stuff kind of a total pain. And it's like your stamina bar feels very weak in this game. Like I feel like after the first Souls, they really nerf stability. So which makes shields almost feel pointless anyway. It's especially against these guys who are just going to keep wailing on you. So like feeling like, well, they can kill me in 1.5 hits, say 2 if I get lucky. So I can either fight these guys in a way that would be a little more fun, or I can keep my distance, kind of wait till they do the combo I know I can pressure, and then do a backstab on them. And I'll get my 1 hit when they get up from the backstab, and then I'll repeat the cycle like 2 or 3 more times, and they'll be dead and move on to the next.
Yeah. And they cover each other too. So fighting multiple ones of these guys ever is really frustrating.
Disaster.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky. And the thing about them doing so much damage is that it's a matter of risk, right? So there's probably somebody listening to this who's just like, you can parry them. And like, yes, that may be true. But I don't like, and this, again, this is the personal preference thing, but like parrying doesn't work for me as a mechanic when the consequences for learning it are death. Right. So like I have to, and this isn't close to a bonfire or anything like that. You have to make a big run through wolf country to get here, and the wolves will follow you here. So like, I do not want to make this run 1,000 times to try to learn the parry timing of these guys. Like that's not fun to me. So I avoided them, and there are those structures that are set up so you can do it. Like they're on patrol here, so you can kind of like hide behind walls and shit to get to this tower.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. So do they have like line of sight? Like, can you manage the aggro? Because so many of these times, you know, like stealth just doesn't really work in this series because of the way aggro works.
It's not really, when I said stealth, that's overplaying it. I think that what it is you can kind of put walls between you and them so you can run faster than their leash will run out.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you can kind of fuck with their pathfinding to not fight them.
Okay.
I fought the first one. It took a lot of Estus. I kind of figure out what they were about and then stopped fighting these guys.
Yeah.
A couple of them, when you run into in the second batch of them, I fought them to check out their new moves and stuff, but I didn't enjoy it. So like these guys are on the fail side of the pass fail. Souls enemies for me.
And these are the guys we see them later in the mountain pass, right? Like they're interspersed. Okay, good. So I have bought these guys, like, and the story behind them. So this is another, you know, set of people without a home, but like they got Roanoke out of their forest, right? Like people found this place and all it was there was the Eldritch Oak or something like that. It's
their spirit tree. It's the same thing. There's been a couple of references to them, but the Curse Rotted Great Tree is one of them as well.
Yeah.
So they have this other thing. There's also an element of them, their ancient enemy, which is the Chaos Dragon.
The Abyss Dragon.
The Abyss Dragon, thank you. Yeah, God damn it. But the Abyss Dragon, thank you. Which is, you know, could be a new thing, could be Calamite, you know, could be a couple different things.
Yeah.
But they're a non sequitur story. You know, like you do get a complete little story that is not a bad story on its own. of
Right.
these guys kind of coming here, like going back to their home, wandering forever. Like it's kind of good. It's kind of a good little story. It just doesn't reflect on anything.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating. Like it's a fine story in and of itself. A little frustrating. You get most of that from the captain's ashes, which you find in this Archer Tower. That kind of tells like the main thrust of their story.
Yeah.
These guys, they are said to fight with the earth itself, and later ones we're going to have earthquake powers.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat.
I like getting up to the top of that tower and the archer's got his back to you. And I just kicked him right off the tower.
Yeah.
And by kicked him off the tower, I mean I tried to kick him off the tower, flubbed the kick, and then flailed at him with my sword until he fell off. But same difference.
That's it's totally what it's made for too. It's like the idea that it's a revenge setup.
Yeah. You're like the amount of great bow enemies in these levels is like it's certainly nothing like Anne or Londo, like nothing that's gonna brand itself in your memory, but like there were just a couple points where I was like, we're doing this again, huh? And they explode now. The arrows hit you and knock you over, and then they explode.
But you can get those, and I assume they are fun to use. So
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little side thing. It doesn't lead to anything. Like I don't blame you for missing it, because it is one, it tries to discourage you from going that way. It tries to bounce you off it, but then two, it's pretty hidden. Instead, we can.
I just feel bad because normally I do everything. Blah.
Yeah, that's why like I mentioned the last episode. That's why if I think I'm missing something, I text Allison. So I can put in a good word for you if you.
I mean, the pass is like such an oblique angle.
Yeah.
I think I only found it because I was coming down from getting the spear the way you go up to get it instead of just jumping off that cliff. And I was like, oh, there's like a whole nother part of this level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's head to that bridge and tower, the kind of more critical path here.
To the critical path, which, dun dun dun, it's that one image whenever it shows up in any collateral for the series, be it a screenshot, a trailer, even just like writing the words out. The rope bridge. Is this the place? Is it? Have I guarded my heart too much? The Dragon Area and the Dragon Shrine, that kind of tripped me up thinking this was going to be the Painted World again. But no, here we are. We're looking up at a tower and there's a rope bridge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is it's a rope bridge with secrets too, which we will we'll talk about in a little bit.
Which is also just like you just did this.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like the level design in this place drives me nuts. As a person who I don't like to brag or boast because I don't think I'm that good at that many things. But like one thing I am pretty good at is keeping video game geography in my head. Mm-hmm. And I did this entire DLC in like the worst possible order. Like they could not have intended this order, because I got to this place, like I cross this bridge, I get to this tower, and I go, well, you know what a bridge means in Dark Souls 3. So I hit the bridge and I went down there and like you get down there and you fight a boss. And I was like, well, where's the rest of the game? Because I was like, it can't be over, get it? But like, so like I sort of went through this whole optional area first before proceeding on what's like the actual plot thing.
Yeah.
Just because, like, right before you hit this bridge, there's like the most obscure ladder.
That ladder sucks. The hidden ladder that is the critical path of the game.
Yeah, and again, I only found that because I was coming up the other ladder. And I was just like, oh, now I'm in this other area. Oh, I guess this is where I was supposed to go in the first place.
Yeah. But I think that they gain, they gain something with that anyway by having this be an apparent dead end. Almost, because when we get across this and we meet this this knight, the Sir Wilhelm, who's kind of a dick.
Yeah. He says his dialogue is actually interesting.
Yes.
Here. So one, he's surprised that you're there because there's no bell, which sets up kind of a cosmology here that bells would summon this kind of unkindled ash here as well.
Right.
He doesn't know how you got in here, but he's more or less just like, go talk to her, go talk to the lady. She's going to tell you what to do. Make sure you do it. Mm-hmm. He's real aggro with you. We learn about this guy later. He also has different dialogue if you are the Lord of Hollows,
right?
Which is pretty rad. That like, because it's those little touches like that are actually worthwhile, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't reflect on the main game. It doesn't tell us anything about the Lord of Hollows, but I always like that in it's like something you see in Western RPGs,
Mm-hmm.
where like, you go and you get a title, and then when you walk around the town, everyone calls you by that title.
Yeah.
It's like New Reno in Fallout 2.
Yeah. And you could be forgiven for thinking that him calling you Lord of Shadows aligns this entire place with Londor. But in reality, it's just the powers that be. Like, this has little to nothing to do with Londor itself. But still, that casts an entirely different light on both this character, Frida, who we're going to see here, and also like gives a little bit more meat to the idea of what it means to be the Lord of Hollows. Like, you are a king. Like, the way they send you away is saying, hey, you've got really important stuff to do.
Right. Which, we don't see, but it does kind of that little part that like saying that as a king is one of the very few things in this DLC that like I think does reflect on the main game.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's such a tiny detail, but it's, I'm thirsty for any crumb that contextualizes what the Lord of Hollows actually means or is. And I think that says more about how the main game doesn't tell you what that ending actually is than it does, tell you. Then it's a credit to this. It's more of a detriment to that, I think. Mm-hmm. You go into this church here, and it is full of paintings of the same woman over and over and over, which is pretty interesting. There are a lot of cool kind of theories as to who this might be and why there are all these paintings of this woman. And we run into Sister Frida.
Yeah, sitting beneath a statue of a headless mother holding a baby.
Yeah.
Way into it. Like this entire tableau that this cuts is incredibly satisfying to me aesthetically.
Yeah, it looks really neat. Like, it is evocative and helps, it's actually the kind of theorizing and the lore behind who this is and who's in that statue and stuff, like, is all stuff I buy. It's I want to make it clear that like my shitty feelings about the story of the DLC are not that the story itself is necessarily bad. Mm-hmm. It's that it's a new story that I didn't feel like necessarily needed to be told. But she says to leave. Like, she, you have this duty. If you're the Lord of Hollows, she says you have people to rule. Mm-hmm. The weirdest thing is she like points out a game element. Yeah. She's like, you can leave by that bonfire. Surely you can see it. Which
love like that so much.
It's very strange. Like, can regular characters not see bonfires in the world? Like, what does that mean? Like, it's something that is just a gameplay contrivance. Whenever like a story thing intersects with that, it's very, very odd to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it's neat.
Yeah, it's a little like, is this Silent Hill 3? If you're taking it literally, like, and her not just being like, you could see that, right?
Yeah.
So get to stepping.
Well, it's I like taking it literally too. Like, it shows how much she thinks of you. Like, yes, the door out is right behind you. So when you came in, yes.
Yeah. Like, obviously you can leave. Yeah. Which previous Painted Worlds you can't. It's been established that you can't. But this one, you can leave whenever you want. And it's just kind of it is a cool moment. And she's talking to the player as well. And we're going to run into that kind of stuff. Especially with Sir Wilhelm is talking to the character and the player most of the time when he's talking.
Yeah.
It's doing that thing. So of course you're not going to leave though. If you talk to her again, she's like, oh, here's actually a trinket. I can't have it. And she gives you the chill bite ring. Yes. A remembrance of this cold world for the great Lord of Londor.
Yeah.
Here. And this is another one of the bite rings, which are from Kareem, where terrible war crimes are committed to create them, essentially. And it would never touch Frida's hand because this frozen world became her home. And when we kind of learn about her backstory, it ends up making sense.
Right.
That she would not try to reject this kind of or protect herself against the frozen aspect of this world.
Right.
Because as we will learn, like, her kind of position is to embrace it.
Yeah.
Warts and all.
Yeah, like she has, I mean, like the actual line is she's taken on whatever form is kind of like demanded of her by the people here, kind of being the leader they want, not the leader they deserve. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like, yeah, she is here. She wants to embrace it and she wants to preserve it.
Yeah. On your way out, here's Wilhelm talking to the character and the player. Says, hey, you should do what she says. She told you to leave. The bonfire is back there. Curiosity will become your cross.
This is a pretty dope line.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, real good. What he says later is actually really good in a vacuum too. Mm-hmm. Like him kind of chiding the player.
Yeah.
So we're going to go do this little optional thing before we continue down the super hidden critical path. Ironically, less hidden is cutting down that rope bridge, because now, similar to finding your first mimic, in Dark Souls 1, I'm going to slash every rope bridge forever.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to old games and slash those rope bridges. I think there are things people haven't discovered yet.
Yeah, Uncharted 2 will have amazing hidden depths for you. I assume there are lots of rope bridges in that game. I've never played it.
That's a safe bet.
Seems like a rope bridge genre. So you cut down this bridge. It's exactly like the Catacombs of Carthus. Like, yes, they just did this. It would be a really amazing trick if this was new. There's some roots on loan from the Great Hollow collection. So you do that again. But it's pretty tricky because there are giant javelin guys. There are Millwood javelin throwers and archers down here on your way down to a frozen lake at the bottom.
Yeah. I dig this. I like the scenery of this a lot. And even from a play standpoint, kind of figuring out a way not to fall and die is pretty fun. I don't know, like this kind of worked for me. And even, my Ulila, whatever, love of extreme highs and lows. Like, I look down at this big frozen river, like, oh, I can probably get down there. And then to actually get to that surface is pretty great.
Yeah, I came into that kind of scared that this was going to be like that one like lump in Blighttown where you're going to get the robes, the red robes. I can't remember what they're called. Yeah. But like on the way back, you always fall off. Like just so I was just convinced that there was going to be some sort of like texture malformation that was just going to kill me. But it turned out it was just the exploding archer guys.
Yep.
But like ultimately, I didn't feel like this was the hardest thing to navigate. It was kind of a neat, like, I like when you're in a thing, what the size is a lot bigger than you think it should be. Mm-hmm. So like climbing down giant tree roots, I was like, this is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is I appreciate it too. Like, and it's beautiful looking. Like, this is kind of peak snowy aesthetic.
Yeah.
This kind of ice lake. It looks very cool. For no particular reason, there are giant ice crabs here. Like, ice crabs are a thing, right? Like, is that a kind of crab in real life, or they suck them out of the ice? I haven't watched a show on TLC in a long time, but
house hunters
over the ice.
Yeah. Well, the shells are like houses, you see. In the
no, the shells are like their skeleton. I think you're thinking of snails.
Okay.
Yeah, hermit crabs.
Yeah, like they're the ice road crabsters who go around and pull them out of the road.
You keep the crabs on ice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm
thinking of that. Yeah.
I'm doing a search for ice crabs, and I'm just seeing crabs kept on ice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anywho, they're ice crabs here.
Yeah, it's like second verse, same as the first. I like that they're like the key cards in Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, like you got to carry them here, and then you have to take them to the lava crab, or they're already the lava crabs.
Yeah.
You have to make the room temperature
like a transitory crab that can be anything depending on its environment.
Yep.
Then it's like
there are three states of crabs.
Crab this whole time.
Yeah, transitory crab was a cut boss.
They're very difficult. You fight a lot of them at once. One of my favorite moments in a Vadi video is him just being like, "All right, I fought these guys. You don't have to. You get a crystal gem." But it's because like nobody's fighting these things. There's no real reason to engage with these fuckos here.
There's one path you can go down to get the cold snap, or sorry, the snap freeze spell. Cold snap would be a much better name for that spell. And that is the first inkling that we get that Sullivan came from here. Again, that is just kind of guarded by these tree witches. That theory holds no water for me, that he is born of a tree. I think it's there's a far more likely culprit for who his mother would be.
It's far more likely that tree was Laddersmith Gilligan. Gilligan?
Yes. Yeah, Gilligan. Yeah. Because that tree triggers a ladder and some of the worst signaling in the game.
Why?
Yeah.
What?
It just shows up.
Don't feel bad about missing this either, Cole, because this is dumb. If you kill that, all you miss was a slab. When you kill this tree, and this is the one that like turns into a Ringo and crawls around on its back.
Right. I saw that.
If you kill it, there's a sound effect that happens that is supposed to signal that a ladder has descended.
Oh, cool. Like happens in this game.
Yeah. I hate that. So it's like bad adventure game signaling where like I asked this person about this unrelated thing, so now this guy will talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that so much. Like I hate bad, like, non sequitur signaling like this, and that's exactly what it is, and it just lets you go up to a little ledge and grab a slab, but it's so cheap.
Which eventually
it's
loops back to the main path.
Okay.
Yeah, it is below Dark Souls to do this kind of shit, where like just killing a load-bearing creature makes an unrelated thing on the other side of the map happen.
Yeah.
So that's very frustrating. But anyway, so this is where we learn, again, Sullivan is from this, and we're getting our cryomancies here. I haven't really played a sorcerer in this game. I tried it and it was very underpowered at the start, and I stopped. But this is I don't know if the cryomancies are good or not.
Seems like more of a PvP thing. Like
throwing a status into the mix that people are unlikely to be spec'd to defend against. Is probably pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm down for that. The other way, it's funny, we were talking about Metal Gear Solid before. Takes you to the end of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this gigantic field of white flowers.
Yes, and Cole, gravestones and a big wolf.
Oh, why is that so
gravestone? Yeah, a gravestone with a sword leaning on it. With just like this. So this is the champion's grave tender. People don't agree with me that the final boss of this is bad. I think it's pretty bad, but people like that one. Nobody likes this. Yeah. Like I haven't heard anyone say this is a good boss.
I liked at first that it does like the anime thing of he swings their shield and like a lion comes out of the lion face on the shield. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I've played Tales of Vesperia. I know what that is. Or like any other anime game. So I kind of like this part of the fight, but it's that creeping dread that you feel like from the midway point of Dark Souls 3 where you're like, this fight is way too easy.
This is just a dude.
Time for you to refill the health bar or just spawn a whole new guy.
Yeah, it's just a guy at first though.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's like, here's a scrub. Like here's a dipshit to fight. Oh wait, he's what if there was a guy? Like he has kind of an interesting moveset because it's a new weapon that's actually pretty fascinating. Mm-hmm. The Valor Heart. But it's not enough to make him like boss quality. And the way he's dressed, like he just looks like he looks like
looks like a player. He's like mismatched,
like a bad player, like a player that's spec'd not for fashion souls but for min-maxing player.
Yeah, they've got their like clown costume on basically.
Yeah, like he just doesn't like. I've never seen a boss character look less cool than this in the Souls games. Like you can make an NPC character, but like at least dress them up like they're going to, like they're going somewhere.
Yeah. Well, he's meant to be scrubby. Like he's the grave tender. He is not the champion. He's a page. Like he is the guy who like followed the champion around and like opened doors for him.
But this is exceptionally scrubby. Yep. Like they've at least made people like not look mismatched. He could have like shoddy looking clothing but still look like peasants' clothes. Like we've seen peasants in this series and they don't look like they're just hit random on their character creator until it became this.
It's not Monster Factory.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it definitely a he? I mean, I'm not gonna contest you guys on this. I feel like at some point I got in my head that there was a she used somewhere, either the wolf or the dude. Like maybe I'm just completely conjuring that from nothing.
I don't know.
But I felt like it was something. I always think of Sif as a she, but I feel like that is wrong.
No, Sif is a lady. I'm pretty sure that's canonical. I couldn't cite a source for it off the top of my head.
Sif being female is the name. Sif is a female Norse.
Sure, because it's Norse. Yeah.
So Sif is probably
I think that's probably where I get it from.
Yeah.
Looking at pictures of this guy, I think this is definitely a dude.
Yeah, I guess if you look at the Valor Heart item description, it says the champion fought on without rest until he lost his mind.
Yeah.
Oh wait, only his page and a lone wolf stayed at his side, so that's actually describing.
So maybe
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm just sort of making that up, but I got something in my head about it that either that or the soul description or something.
He just looks like a zombie. So like if you look at him, like I'm looking at a high res like picture of somebody front stabbing him right now, and it's definitely a male physique. Yeah.
So the wrinkle for this first part of the fight is that it's not only that we have the grave tender who has this new weapon art that we've never seen before, but he has 3 wolves that are around him. And fighting with him. And, the order of operations here is kind of important because he is not as dangerous as all of those wolves are together. So you want to take out the wolves, then him, and then when his support comes, kill him as quickly as possible so you can focus on more pressing matters.
And his support, as we mentioned, is the giant wolf, more or less from before.
Yeah, it's not Sif.
Yeah, it's not Sif, which I was like, man, if that's Sif, I quit.
Yeah.
It's technically not Sif. It's definitely trying to evoke Sif memories of having this
like
wolf.
completely uggo.
It's super ugly in a bad fight. Like Sif is actually like a cool creative fight. This is just another big dog that we fought like a quadrillion times.
Yeah, its charge attack is straight out of the old Watchdog of the Old Lords. Kind of playbook.
That keeps appearing like between those the Sullivan's Beasts and stuff. Like out of all the things to just kind of copy paste movesets from, why would you take like the most frustrating boss from Bloodborne, or one of the most frustrating bosses, and like map him onto so many enemies in Dark Souls 3? Like,
yeah, I think for me, I was just sort of so charmed by its animations and just having a sort of general affection for dog creatures in games, even the ugly ones, that sort of raised my estimation of the fight. Or it was that combined with the fact that it's a fairly cheap fight because it is very fast, and it basically all of its moves are gap closers. It's got one of those breath attacks that like, hope you're in the right place, or like hope you don't respond on instinct and try and run away from it because you'll just die. Like, yeah. So it's one of those ones where it's like, if you happen to be standing right next to it when it does it, enjoy your free damage. Like otherwise, sustain and have an Estus. So I found the fight very difficult, therefore found it satisfying when I beat it. And I beat it a lot by like anything that I can bleed, I will take the easy way out and just throw kukris. So like, if I'm out of Estus, it's kukris till the cows come home, basically. So it's like, I think that's how I finished that fight, was just chucking bleed knives at it until it went down after I drained all my Estus. And so at the time, it felt, that sort of profound Dark Souls relief. But reflecting on that, I was like, that boss is kind of a jerk. And all the bosses in this are kind of jerks.
He's not, so Sif, like the cool thing about Sif and is like, one, so he's not a big dog. He's a big dog holding a sword, which like when I first saw that, I thought that was goofy and stupid. And now I love it with all of my heart. Like now I think that is stupid in the best possible, coolest way. But the neat thing about that is how it influences the fight. Like I'm not fighting a big wolf. To me, like fighting a dog is really pedestrian. I'm fighting this dog that was trained by this great swordsman. And then later I fight that swordsman and see shadows of the moves from that dog. And like, that's so cool. This is it. It's like, just like, who is this? Yeah. Like there's no context to this to give it meaning. So it ends up just kind of being a dog, like an NPC fight, some little dogs and a big dog fight that I have no connection to or care for. And to be fair, like, if people are like, you're being too hard on it, it's just a multiplayer concern. Yep. Like I get it. Like you're totally right. Like this is not meant to be a story mission. This is just a weird little side thing to introduce you to the multiplayer component of the DLC. Fine. But for my purposes of going through it single player, I found it pretty frustrating and unsatisfying. Yeah. Fight and lore and context.
But also like kind of have respect for this thing that a lot of people really enjoy. Like if it is supposed to be insubstantial, because it is leading to this multiplayer thing, don't cash in on one of the most beloved boss fights of the first game.
Yeah.
One
that's so much dignity, right? Yeah. So like that quiet dignity thing that we all love in Souls, like, is there a better like dictionary picture for that than Sif limping and you having to put him down anyway? Yeah. Like Sif falling on his side, trying to hit you with his sword. Is there like a better single thing that can happen that encapsulates the aesthetic of like how Dark Souls enemies work? Or the emotionalism to them. And then just to be like, oh, here, the players would probably like a giant wolf next to a grave with a sword, because that's what they liked about the first one. Yeah. It feels like a misunderstanding of the series to me in like a real fundamental way. Like it does, like I think you said disrespectful, and like games aren't people, they don't have honor. But there is an element where it's like, man, is this a cheapening of something that is really special? Mm-hmm. The fact that it's just for a PvP arena almost makes it worse, because it's literally a throwaway optional thing that leads to something that is not related to the stories you're telling.
For me, like I could almost think of it as like less a disrespect to the game, and not to be like completely melodramatic about this. And this is not how I feel in like a deep, trenchant way, but like it feels a little disrespectful to me as like, you don't think I'm better than this? Like, you think this is all I want? Like, just tell me
Yeah.
Sif exists, please, because I love Sif so much. Like, and I love Artorias so much, and I do. Like, I feel Artorias is like one of the best boss battles in recent memory, but it just makes me feel worn out to be like so aggressively pandered to. And I'm like, dude, you're pretty much a fine game by yourself. You're not my favorite Souls game, but like even a C- Souls game is not a C- video game, basically,
Right.
or at least as far as they've been putting them out. So like, I would have been more content if this was the same DLC with like a lot of these serial numbers filed off.
And Dave, Gary, you're going to need to edit in some sirens, I think, because you just said the magic word, worn out.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really?
I'm not actually. That's not a no.
Okay.
Will's just making up things and trying to make the edit harder for me. I wronged him in a past life, and he's just.
No,
I'm not gonna. That to me, like that's funny, and it's snarky about things being worn out. But at the same time, I'm feeling too much genuine emotion.
I feel worn out. Is my is my big thing. I have a lot of genuine emotion about this, but like, this is the most recent in a parade of kind of indignities about this.
Yeah.
And so like that's where my acid comes from.
Yeah.
With that.
Which I totally get. It's pretty frustrating. You fight him, this weapon that you get, which we talked about, the Valor Heart is pretty interesting. It's a sword and shield combo that has block frames on some of its attacks, which means it blocks while you're attacking, which is totally new to the series and is like I don't play a lot of PvP, but I could see it actually being legitimately really interesting and shaking things up. So like good on them for coming up with a new mechanic for this. You also get the Champion's Bones, which allow you to burn that at Firelink to enter a PvP arena and fight. These are set up as duels, so like they have restrictions, they have time limits, they stop you from using Estus. If you were just looking to duel, this seems like this is good. In my final evaluation of the DLC, I can't really include this because that's not why I play these games. But everything I've kind of read, everything I've looked at is this is actually like, people wanted more because people always want more, but what's here is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
As far as a PvP arena.
Yeah. So, forgive us if we don't talk too much about this. Like it's 1 versus 1 or, 3 versus 3 duels. We have some stuff in the appendix about this. People who had kind of mixed experiences with it. But there is some lore about this. Like it's essentially a great outdoor fight that was held for the undead to celebrate undeath. Yeah. But that's what we get by kind of fighting this optional boss here. And Gary, we're calling it an audible, right?
Yeah. We don't usually do this because we plan these things out, but this was going to be a 4-hour episode. So we're going to break it in half. This is, the DLC is short, but it is dense. Like a lot of people were like, oh, this is too short kind of hour wise. And that might be the case, but there is a lot to talk about. And because almost none of it references stuff we've already talked about, it's all new. So we're actually going to do this as 2 episodes rather than 1. That will come out next week instead of the appendix. And we're still going to be joined by Dave. Dave's hanging around. But we're splitting this in half.
Yeah.
So as we move on, so thank you for agreeing to do that, Dave. Thank you for doing this in the first place. Let people know for this Sunday, this episode, where they can find you. It's gonna be real weird. I'm gonna ask you that same question in about 90 minutes. but for now,
it's okay. I have my answer prepared. My sort of general website is friendsfromtheinternet.com. I'm Fast Karate most places, Twitter, Twitch. If I may, and if this is too strong a plug, feel free to whack me on the nose with the newspaper. I had just had a book come out. It's sort of a YA paranormal novel called The Dead Side Girl. Werewolves, vampires. As discussed, I think wolves are pretty cool. But it's mostly about being a depressed teen with too much empathy. And I'm sort of donating the proceeds to a local New York charity called the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, which is it's legal aid for trans and gender nonconforming people to help with name changes, IDs, immigration, stuff like that. So I know you guys, like I caught portions of the Duck stream, and I know you guys are sort of friendly to those sorts of causes, and I feel like it's a sort of now more than ever thing. Yeah. So I've sort of been trying to find ways to contribute however I can. And so just briefly, deadsidegirl.com is the link to that. But, everything's on Twitter nowadays, and so am I, and all my links are there at Fast Karate.
Yeah, well, good for you, man.
That's tremendous.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. Really good. And that's 100% something we feel good about having plugged on the show.
Yeah.
For us, if you like this show, and the best way to support it and support the entire network is to go to Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv, even as little as a couple bucks a month makes a big difference. I know that's a cliche, but it's absolutely true.
We've seen it.
We've seen it in action. And so we really do appreciate that. And you get a lot of cool rewards. You can read about all of that stuff there.
Yep. Like that enables us to do new shows like Radio Free Midworld. That's a new show that just has kind of hit its stride, which is a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King. That is a tremendous amount of fun to do, and I wouldn't be able to do it without your support.
Yeah, and we have other stuff that will come down the way. Lots of neat stuff, and you should definitely check that out there. Ratings reviews are also very useful. A big thing now, since we are coming up on the winter holidays, is to use our Amazon referral link. You're probably doing Christmas shopping on Amazon. Everyone uses Amazon constantly. We don't blame you. It's very good. If you go to Duckfeed.tv/tipjar, you can go through that Amazon link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it actually makes a pretty big difference for us.
Yes.
So if you can't patronize us, which we understand, this is a way to make a big difference more or less for free.
And we appreciate everybody who takes the extra step to do that.
I also want to mention real quick, and I put this at the front of the show as well, but I'll put it here. My Dark Souls inspired book, Souls of Darkness, is part of the story bundle this month. So if you go to storybundle.com/games, you can get that. It is in the premium tier. There's a bunch of great stuff at pay whatever you want. A lot of great stuff in the premium tier as well. Including the boss fights books on Super Mario Brothers 3 and the Hardcore Gaming 101 book, the 200 best games of all time, which is great. But you get the audiobook. You get a lot of cool Souls of Darkness stuff there. And that is, not only does that help me out personally because I get money from it, but I'm also donating 10% of the total proceeds go to the Pixel Project, which is a nonprofit that focuses on women in games, young women in games, and then I am donating 10% of my personal proceeds to the ACLU. So go ahead and head there and pick up some books for cheap. And as of this recording, you have 7 days. As of the time this drops, you probably have 5.
Yep.
4 or 5. So time is of the essence. Yep. Get in there.
And because Gary won't say it, I will. Souls of Darkness is great. Read it. It's delightful.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of it. In a recent Abject Suffering, or one that's coming out, there's a funny story about the Souls of Darkness. So you should listen to our other shows as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably about it. We're going to move on to recording the second episode. If this is frustrating to you that we're splitting this in half rather than doing a 4-hour episode, we do apologize, but we also, this show isn't that. This isn't Watch Out for Fireballs. we try to keep things reasonable here in Bonfireside Chatland.
Yep.
So we'll see you in a week, and we'll be talking about the end of the DLC.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon